I need to remember to turn on the recording anyway. So yeah, so the difference between the two types of naginata they're offering. So you can get white or red oak. Either is fine. The white oak tends to be a little bit more expensive, but you're generally not going to feel a huge amount of difference unless you buy one of each. The difference between a Shiai and an Engi naginata is basically more about the weight and the way it handles. So looking at them, you're not really going to be able to tell the difference between the two. But a Shiai one is generally a little bit lighter. And the idea behind that is that you want your movements to be faster. So if you've been training with a heavier weapon, your movements are going to be faster and whippier, which is great for Shiai. So it's like with anything. If you do a lot of weight, so you're lifting up 20 kilogram weights above your head, when you move to a 5 kilo weight, you can do them a lot faster and a lot cleaner. So Engi ones, which are basically for your kata, your grading practice, they're a little bit heavier, they're a little bit more solid. They're great for practice with because they get you used to the heavier one, but they don't move quite as smoothly or as fast as a Shiai one. So I can actually show you a couple here. Because I did mention to nip into the dojo, so I needed to check out a few things anyway. I brought both of mine back with me. So you'll actually see the weapon that we do use, if you haven't seen them before. These are the Atarashi Naginata. So you can see these ones aren't fully oak. They're only oak to about here. And then they've got the two slats of bamboo. Now, one of these is a Shiai, and one of these is an Engi Naginata. You literally cannot tell the difference by looking at them. It's just that this one here, is a little bit heavier and a little bit thicker, but not by much. So it just weighs and moves a bit differently. And then I've got the Shiai one, which is a little bit finer in the haft and just moves a little bit cleaner and faster for me. So just depending on what I want to do, I can use either of these. So yeah, that's really the only difference.
So
you're just going to feel a different weight.
Yeah. Get the heavier one for a beginner is what you're suggesting for practice, is that?
Look, I think you can go with either. To be honest, when you start training with us face-to-face, you'll be using club gear anyway. And so you'll get a feel that most of them are going to be the heavier ones. So you can try them out. And then I think more people are more likely to get a Shiai one for themselves because you can move a little bit faster and quicker with that. So either is fine. You can use the Shiai one for Engi and you can use the Engi one for Shiai.
Perfect, so thank you.
It's more just about a weight and what people prefer. You may actually find you prefer a heavier one to work with, just because of the way your body moves or your reactions are. So yeah, it's good to actually try out a few different weights and see what they're like. All right, so let's do a little bit of a warm-up, and then we'll do a little bit of basic Kihon, maybe a little bit of Waza. I put on some nice bright colored socks so you can actually see what my feet are doing today if you need to. So let me know if anything's clear or you can't hear me, and I'll repeat what have you and try and make sure the lighting doesn't keep switching on me. So just starting with the head, so just bring the right ear to the right shoulder, letting this stretch, gently coming back to the center and down to the left shoulder. Move back into the light, back through the center, to the right, center, and left. So make sure you're dragging your shoulders down. You're extending that stretch without having to do anything extra. Once more each side. So looking up to the ceiling and then down to the floor. Don't do this too fast. Again, you want to lengthen the neck. You don't want to crunch it up. You're just loosening up the joints and the vertebrae. And then looking side to side. Again, keep the shoulders pulled down. That'll help extend the stretch along the side of the neck. And we're going to roll our shoulders, so bring them back. So bring them up as high to the ear as you can, as far back, as far down, as far forward as possible. So we're really opening up. If you're feeling any kind of little twinge or impingement, just do them slower and really let them stretch out. So you want to be gentle if you're feeling your joints going at any point. And then coming the other way. Bringing one arm across the body, keeping the arms straight, the shoulder down, We're getting a stretch along the shoulder here. And changing sides. And bring the arm over the head, trying to bring it down the center of your spine. So getting a nice stretch along the tricep here. And changing sides. Keeping your feet a little bit wide apart. We're just going to do some spinal rotation, so just turning on the spot. Keeping your head and your chest raised. And go into the hips, so just some hip circles. You can start off small if you like and just start warming up those joints. And then when they're getting a bit more comfortable, you can extend them in each direction. So I know I've said this before, but the more you open up the front, the more you open up the hip flexors, the more you push to the back, the more you're going to stretch those hamstrings, especially if you're keeping your legs straight, so not bending in the knees. So it's a good way to wake up a few different parts of the body in one go. Other way. All right. We're just going to soften our knees up. So hands on the knees. We're not trying to get particularly deep. We're not trying to go very fast. All we're just doing is gently bending our knees so that they're getting a very gentle wake up. They're the ones that tend to click the most. Always focus on making sure the knees are going in line with your toes. So try and make sure your toes are pointing straight ahead of you. If they are out to the side, that's fine. Just make sure the knees are going in that direction too. So a lot of the issues people tend to suffer in various sports or martial arts, etc., is that they don't stack their joints in alignment when they're doing technique. What you end up with is basically shifting those joints in a bad position. All right. Just with the feet, just pressing them into the floor, so onto the balls of the foot, putting a little bit of weight on them, switching over. Can do it as a little bit of a hoedown dance once they've warmed up a little bit. I've got the perfect socks for that, nice and colourful. I swear if this turns into a video meme of some kind, I'm going to be very, very embarrassed, but that's okay. My fault. Turning it the other way, so what you're doing is you're coming into the ball of the foot and then you're rolling over the top, so you're getting a stretch across the front. If you have trouble with that position, put the foot behind you and then lay it down. And changing sides. You can pick that leg up, bring it to your backside, try and keep your knees together, so they're nice and tight, pulling up through the body, so we're getting a stretch up the quad here. And changing over. We're going to stretch out the hamstrings, so both feet facing one direction, both legs straight, kneel forward, keep the back heel on the ground, even if that means you're further up. That's going to give you the nice stretch along the lower part of the leg and up the back of the hamstring. And then shift your weight to the center, pull the front toe back. So again, you're getting a nice stretch along here. Change over again, so moving it forward and pulling it back. Changing legs. So again, both feet planted, heels on the floor, kneeling forward, keeping that back leg straight. Come back through the center and roll the toes of the front foot back as you bend your back. Forward and back. All right, just shake out your hands, grab a little drink if you need to. In my case, turn off the heating because it's now gotten too warm down here. All right, so as I said, today we're going to do a little bit of a mix and match. We're going to start with a little bit of basics, do some Kihon, maybe get some Wazang. Second half, we're actually going to have a bit more of a discussion, so some theory, some terminology, and Q&A. Basically, we'll see what happens. So, grabbing whatever you're using for your Naginata today, and back on the faithful broomstick. All right, so just reiterating our positions. We're in Shizenpai. Our heels are together, so we're not fully duck foot, but you do have a little bit of an angle to your feet. You have your right wrist resting against your right hip, and then holding the Naginata straight up. Left hand resting gently at your side, pulling up through the body. When we bow as if someone's just pushed our stomach. So the rest of our body is glued in place, but our upper body is going to fall forward. So, rip. Chura no kamae, left hand on top, left foot steps forward. Check your position. Back elbow to the end of the Naginata. Both hands just a little bit further than shoulder width apart. And then the right hand sitting where your your right leg meets the groin. Just going to start with some footwork. So, Ayumi Ashi, Mai. Ayumi Ashi, Ato. Just going to pull these up so you can see what my legs are doing. Ayumi Ashi, Mai. Ayumi Ashi, Ato. A little bit of skin. Ayumi Ashi, Mai. So try to keep your upper body still and steady, keep the knees bent. That will keep you from kind of bouncing up and down with each movement. Ayumi Ashi, Ato. We're going to do Okureashi, so that's a single step. And again, keep the knees bent so that your head isn't rising above or below. If you can kind of see the orange curtain behind my head, it's roughly in line with where I am standing naturally with my knees a bit bent. I'm going to try and keep it in that line. Okureashi, Mai, 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 Okureashi, Ato, 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 Okureashi, Mai, Mai, Ato, Mai, Mai, Ato, Ato, Ato. Sugiashi. This is the harder one. This is where your body starts to bounce a bit. Again, you need to keep the knees bent. Sugiashi, Mai, Sugiashi, Mai, Sugiashi, Ato, Sugiashi, Ato, Sugiashi, Mai, Sugiashi, Mai, Sugiashi, Ato, Sugiashi, Ato, Mai, Mai, Ato, Harakiashi, Migi, Harakiashi, Migi, Harakiashi, Hidari, Harakiashi, Hidari, Harakiashi, Migi, Harakiashi, Hidari. Fumi Kaeshi. So we bring our hands together as we step forward, and then we step back with the left foot. So we're in Chudan, but we're on the side. Fumi Kaeshi. Meno. So Fumi Kaeshi. Don't want to do a cut just yet. Fumi Kaeshi. Fumi Kaeshi. Fumi Kaeshi. Fumi Kaeshi. Good. We're going to go into our basic cuts. So just make sure I don't hit the ceiling, and I apologize if you hear any loud, destructive noises from mine. Furiagete, men o ute, men. Furiagete, men o ute, men. Furiagete, men o ute, men. Furiagete, ne wo ute, ne. Apologies, I think I managed to burp out my key. Furiagete, ne wo ute, ne. Remembering the snare, you are lodging it a little bit higher into our belly, making sure the weapon is between our arms and our body. Furiagete, ne wo ute, ne. Hasto no kamae. Sokume no ute, men. 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 Sayu, so 2. Sayu, meno ute. Men. Men. Sayu, meno ute. Men. Men. Sneo ute, so coming into hustle. Sne. Sneo ute. Sne. Sneo ute. Sne. Sneo ute. Sne. Sayu, 2 cuts. Sayu, snail with this. Snit. Snit. Sayu, snail with this. Snit. Snit. Dowo with this. So we're going to bring our hands together, come into Waki no Gamai. Make sure you've got a gap between your hands and your body. Roll it over the left leg. Dowo with this. Do. Do with this. Waki no Gamai. Roll it over the right leg. Do. Do with this. Do. Do with this. Do. Let's see if we remember kote. Remember, kote is just a small movement. We're not bringing the foot forward. We're just rotating the back foot and then pushing off with a little okuriash. The cut ends just below where we would have chura no kamae. Koteo with this, so just raise it just to about hand to forehead height. Kote. Koteo with it. Kote. Koteo with it. Kote. Koteo with it. Kote. Koteo with it. Kote. All right. Furikaeshi. We're going for men first. Furikaeshi. Meno ute, so turn. You can step forward, you can stay on the spot, whichever you prefer. Furikaeshi. Meno ute. Men. There goes the ceiling. Furikaeshi. Meno ute. Men. Furikaeshi. Meno ute. Men. Good. Now re. Re. Good. Anyone have any questions on any of the techniques, any of the footwork at this point? Feel free to grab a drink as well.
Sorry, and that last one, when I'm really bad with names, the Kuritashi.
Furikaeshi.
Furikaeshi. So there's an for the normal men cut, it's supposed to be your backhand with the power. For that one, I get my hands muddled up. Is it the back or the front, or what happens with that cut?
It's the problem with using the term back and front hand, unfortunately, is that what is the front hand for a period of time becomes the back hand. And it is still the one that powers the actual cut. So it's important to figure out when we're talking about the backhand, it's normally talking about the one that ends up at the back at the end of the strike, if that helps. It probably doesn't help a lot. So when we're doing furiagate, for example, the right hand starts at the back. And when we finish the cut, it's still the back hand and it's still the power hand. When we're doing hustle, so the left hand is currently the front hand. When we finish hustle, it's the back hand and that's the power hand. So when we do do, for example, left hand, if I'm cutting that way, is currently my front hand. But when I finish, it's my back hand, and that's the power hand. So it's the hand that ends up at the back at the end of the strike, and that's normally going to be the one that is locked against your body, because that's helping to make your body part of the weapon. It's helping you to use your body to help power any turn or rotation. So when it comes to furikaeshi, so if I've got my left hand here, right hand back, so it's a standard chura no kamae. When I start this one, my right hand comes to meet my left, so they're both on center. As I step through, my left hand's sliding down to the base of the naginata, so it's currently in front, but when I finish, it's my back hand, and that's where the power comes from. It comes from this draw down from above. So if I didn't have this hand here, I would still have a lot of power and momentum and weight from this hand. If I try to leverage from the hand at the middle, I have a lot less power and leverage because of the positioning. So backhand is the power hand, and it really does refer to the hand that ends up at the back or on the body generally at the end of the strike, if that makes sense. So yeah, it's nicely complicated because some things start off as the front hand, sometimes they become the middle hand, sometimes there is no front hand for a bit, but it's talking about the backhand at the end of the actual striking moment. All right, just gonna check the time. Okay, let's have a little bit of fun for the moment. So let's I was gonna make you do Uchikayashi, but let's leave that in favor for a little bit of waza for the moment. So just gonna wake up the brain, wake up the reactions. So I am going to give you a men cut. You can choose to block this way. You can choose to pull back and block with the sendan makien. You can choose to rotate and block with the habu, whichever one you prefer to do. I want you then to come up with some kind of attack, seeing what you can see of me as open. Doesn't matter if you have to step back, doesn't matter if you have to change kamae. I just want you to give this an opportunity to try seeing what's available and trying to respond. So I'm not going to dictate what you do as your response. So I can do any men cut. So let's start. Men. Good. Men. 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 Good. All right. Same thing, but this time I'm going for a snake cut. So you can defend snake by literally bringing the leg out of the way, so you draw it back and move your body back. You can block gedan, so pulling your right hand up towards your shoulder and rotating it up so the palm is facing out, block. You can rotate, block with the ebu, whatever you like to do. And again, follow it up with what you can see is technically open on me. You can throw in a harai if you want. All good. All right. Snap. 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 All right. So this time, I know it's a bit harder on Zoom because you can't see my face quite as clearly. I'll either go for men or for snake. You can do any block and any follow-up. So don't worry if you read the cue wrong. Again, it's much harder here than it is face-to-face, but just allow yourself to react to what you can then see as open. All right, I'll stand a little bit closer so you can kind of see what I'm doing. Men. Good. Snake. And I'm trying to give you some visual clues, but it's very, very hard this way. Men. Men. Good. Excellent. A nice snake up there. Snake. Good. All right. Just going to check the time again. All right, almost at 1/2 past. We are going to do it with Uchikayashi. So we're going to work through the Uchikoyashi pattern together. Furiagete men, Sayus men, Sayus ne, Sugiyashi. Furiagete men forwards, Sayu men backwards, Sayus ne backwards, Sugiyashi. Furiagete men. So it's a long thing, but the pattern stays the same. All the Furiagete men go forward, all the Sugiyashi go backward. Everything else is either the forward set or the backward set. So, and if you need to reset because you don't have enough room between each step, that's fine. I'll try and take this a little bit slower. So, Uchikoyashi, Hajime, Furiagete men, men, Sayu men, 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 Sayu sne, 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 Sugiyashi backwards, Furiagete men forwards, men, Sayu men backwards, men, men, Sayu sne backwards, sne, sne, Sugiyashi back, Furiagete men, men, and then Sugiyashi. So you may have noticed if you were watching that some of these I was doing on the spot, some of them I was moving only a tiny bit, and that's the thing with your footwork. When we're practicing our Taisabaki, our footwork, normally we're trying to show the movement across the room, but a lot of these techniques, you can just kind of swap your feet position so that you're not moving forward or backward. And this can help you when you have very little room to move in. So I actually might just show off those lovely stockings again. I'm kind of glad I've got some nice bright ones. So, Furiagete men. So in this one, I'm not stepping too far forward, and I'm almost swapping my feet so I have to retain some space. Passo men. I'm literally going to swap my feet position. Men, passo men. Men, passo sne. Sne, passo sne. Sne, Sugiyashi back. So then I get myself some more room. Furiagete men forwards. Men, I've run out of room again, so I'll do the rest on the spot. Sayu men, going backwards. I turn my feet. Sayu men. Sayu sne. Sugiyashi. Furiagete men. Sugiyashi backwards. So you can modify the width, the depth of your footwork, or literally just swap on the spot to change your distance depending on the room you're in. So when you're in Shiai, you're not always going to do full steps. You are going to be modifying them dependent on the room you have between you and your opponent. So let's do that one again. Uchikoyashi. Hajime, Furiagete men. Men. Sayu men. 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 Sayu sne. 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 Sugiyashi. Furiagete men. Men. Sayu men. 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 Sayu sne. 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 Sugiyashi. Furiagete men. Men. Sugiyashi. Good. Let's see if we can remember some of the blocks for this. I'm only going to worry about the ones going backwards, so the first time you're receiving. We start in Shura no Kamae. They're coming for Furiagete men, so we pull the weapon behind us and block up. So I might do this with, I may just have enough room to do this with here. So Furiagete men, we pull back and block with our mono-ichi. They're next coming for our men, so we're going to block with our ebu. We rotate it up. Men. They're coming for our head. We're going to bring it over. Block men. They're coming for our legs. We're going to block with the ebu as we step backwards. They're coming for our other foot. We bring it over and block with the habu. They then Sugiyashi backwards. So all we do is we bring our weapon back into Shura. And then they finish with Furiagete men. So if we're just doing the forward set, all we do is we step back and block with that first block there. Let's just start that from the beginning. So we're both in Shura. They're coming from men. So we're going to pull with our right hand, block men. They're coming for our head, so we're going to rotate around our center, rotate the weapon around our center to block men. They're coming for our head, we rotate it around our center to block men. They're coming for our leg, we rotate it around our center to defend where our leg was. Coming for snare, we rotate and block snare. They go into Tsugiyashi, we meet them in Shudan. They do their Furego to men, we step back, rotating and block men. Anyone got any questions on Uchikayashi? Forwards, backwards, shidachi, uchidachi? No? All good. All right, so what we're going to do now, it's 34 past, and I did say we would have a little bit of a discussion time. So grab yourself a seat, throw on something warm. Time for a little heart-to-heart chat. So there is no such thing as a silly question. If you're asking the question, it's because you want to know the answer, and that is not a silly thing to do at all. I will start by just again showing you the Atarashi Naginata. So you've been seeing me with what is a Jikishin Kage-ryu Naginata, which isn't even one we actually use for when we're doing the Zen-Nihon kata. But it's a decent enough replica when you're in lockdown and you can't get to the dojo. So this is the Atarashi Naginata. Same kind of length, so it's 2¼ meters long. We have an oak haft or handle. We have 2 bamboo slats, which are joined together, well, actually not joined together here, they're actually on each side of the habu, and then they join together at the tip in what we call the kisaki. So this has a very gentle curve along it. What I will try and show you is there's this little bump here along the naginata. And this is 10 to 15 centimeters from the top. When they actually make the habu, they try and deliberately put that around that area because that's where the bend, the curve starts to change. And that is where you actually want to be hitting with or defending with. So that's our mono itch. We do have a mono itch at the other end of the weapon. There isn't a visible mark for it. It's about 20 to 25 centimeters down. And that's where we defend blocks against our legs, or when we're doing it against our head, So it's a little bit further down than it is with the one on the blade. That's mono itchy. Then we have these kind of little rubbery socks, and that's partly to protect the wood, it's partly to protect us in case someone gets hit with it accidentally. So this is called the Ishizuki, which is translated as stonebreaker. And you can use it for thrusting, you can use it for smashing. It used to have, a lot of the time, because these would be metal, you might have a little spike. So shoving it through someone's foot or belly or throat would be quite effective. So that could be used for the thrust or the smashing effect. There is a similar tip at the top of the weapon, that I showed you before. So at the top of the habu or ha, this is the kisaki. So this is the tip of the blade. Again, if you're going to do a thrust with it, that's what you'd be using. I tend to remember it as kisaki. It's near the lips, you're going to kiss them in the face with it. So it's always facing your opponent, have a kiss. Kisaki, Ishizuki, Kisaki, Ishizuki. Don't remember it, worry if you can't remember the names, it takes a while. And you know, at least you'll have a video for this. This area where they join up, they actually cross over for about 15 centimeters. You probably can't see down there too well, but about 1 centimeter down, you can see the top of the habu. So the habu, while it starts off as this kind of oval piece, it actually tapers to a squared off triangle almost, and that's how you can get the habu blades to sit on each side. So they cross over for 15 centimeters, and they have 1 centimeter of wrapping at the top and bottom to make sure they're held in place. So this used to be done with string, with wire, 1,000 times. Sen, which is the Japanese word for 1,000. Sendanmaki. So 1,000 turns. Again, don't worry if you don't remember this. Ha, habu. The handle is e or ebu. So sometimes you might hear someone e harai. So that's a harai or a deflection done with the ebu. So lots of terminology, but this at least gives you a little bit of a chance to see what the Atarashi Naginata looks like. So when it's standing up next to me, if I can get it in this room just barely, yeah. oh, I can't quite get it against the ceiling here, but you can see how tall this is. I barely reach the Sendonmaki. To be fair, I am short, I'm 156 centimeters, but this is a very, very long weapon. And it makes more sense when you actually have it. Why were you doing a lot of leveraging movements using our body, using our hips? Because it is that long. All right, enough little chat about that. I'll keep throwing in random bits and pieces of theory and information, but do either of you have any questions? Any questions?
I've got one.
Yep.
Is there kata for the Naginata that involves Naginata versus the sword? Because that would be a more likely scenario. You don't get too many Naginata. I know in your when you're competing you do, but in sort of real life sort of situations, you probably get a sword versus a Naginata.
Yes, absolutely true. So because this is technically a sport, and I know there are a lot of people who go, oh, it's not a sport. It is a sport. It was redesigned after the war for it to be a sport because it wasn't allowed to be a martial discipline. Because rules after the war, you're not allowed to teach the kids to fight.
Yes.
So technically classified as a sport. Yeah, absolutely. The whole idea is that this was a great weapon against swords. Now, we don't have any real kata or practice techniques against the sword, not in Atarashi anyway. There is a few other styles. So some of the ryus, which are sort of more older traditional koya, and because they're not sports as such, they're more traditional forms, they do tend to work against other weapons. So although technically I wouldn't be teaching you those, there are times where I like to let people have a little bit of fun and see the implications and how it would work against something else. I actually do another style called Toda Habukoriyo, which is a Naginata base as well, much longer, heavier version of it. But it actually teaches kata against the sword, against Nodachi, which is a really long, heavy sword, Tachi, Kusarigama, which is sickle and chain, against the spear, the yari. So some of those techniques can come into play. And if people are really interested, you know, there's no harm in you making the request, and I can bring in one of those weapons so you can kind of see how it might react to look at some of the kata.
Yeah.
And they're very differently styled because they come from more of a I need to kill the opponent mental attitude. So they are quite beautiful.
Because I know that Joe is very much Joe versus sword.
Yes. Yeah. So Atarashi, technically, we don't teach you against other weapons. It's all Naginata versus Naginata. And part of this comes from when it was returned to Japan as a form for high school, etc. Normally, you'd have the girls working with the girls, and they would have the Naginata, and the guys would be against the guys doing kendo. So there wasn't really that crossover. I think now, especially as we've gotten to a more international audience, people do like to do more issuji, so it becomes a bit more common, but there aren't a lot of practices against them, and there aren't many kata unless you actually go to a koryu form. So if you are interested, absolutely, I am happy at, you know, when we get back into face-to-face to actually bring in and maybe show you some of those different kata and how they're styled differently. But, you know, if you're interested in doing another form altogether, I can also introduce you to the Toda Habukoriyo group.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.
And you can, of course, first look it up on YouTube as well. There's a fair amount of this stuff on YouTube as well.
Yeah, I've seen a few the kendo people versus the Naginata. It's quite interesting.
Yeah. Well, the weird thing about that is that generally neither style has ever really practiced against the other. So they go in wailing against each other, and the kendo players all know that the Naginata people are going to be going for their legs, and the Naginata people all know that the best target is the legs. So a lot of the time they haven't really ever trained against each other. There's no kata that they've learned against each other, unless they both happen to do both styles. But no, good question. Anyone else got a question, query? Otherwise, I'll break out some more theory. Okay. So while you're having a bit of a think, I'm going to go over a bit of the terminology. So we did a little bit more formalities there at the start just to get used to it. again, we never expect you to actually know these straight away. They take a while to become part of your vocabulary. They take a while for you to know when to use them. So the most common ones are onegai shimasu and arigatou gozaimasu, or arigatou gozaimashita. So most of you probably know arigato. So domo arigato, thank you. So it's normally used at the end of a setup. So when we finish class altogether, or when you finish a pattern or working with a person, you will thank them for training with you. And it's arigato gozaimashita. The shita at the end is basically it's a phrasing thing from Japanese, where shita helps you know that it's a kind of a past or something that's already happened. Whereas when we use onegai shimasu, it's more, the context is thank you for being about to train with me. Thank you for taking the time to train with me. So it's prefacing you're working with someone or working with the group. And so it doesn't have that shita on the end because you haven't done it yet. So it's a future phrasing. So onegai shimasu and arigatou gozaimashita. So if you're working in pairs and we're rotating around, when you go into chudan, one or both of you might say onegai shimasu. When you're coming back into sentai after finishing and you're about to rotate again, it might be arigatou gozaimashita. It isn't required for you to say it all the time. It's a politeness. If you've really enjoyed training with someone, absolutely. If you want to get the practice of the terminology, go right ahead. But don't feel you have to say it every single time. The only time you do have to say it is when whoever's leading the group, so your gore, if they're starting to take you through the formal bows, and they say onegai shimasu, you will, at the end, when they're bowing you out, you will say arigatou gozaimashita together. So that's kind of the only time it's really required that you use that term. Any other quick questions, or I'll throw some more? Listen, I'll keep throwing in theory and what have you in between questions from you guys.
Could I have a question? I feel like I take over though because I've got so many. Sorry.
This is why I've got a Q&A day.
So I guess my question is more around grading and when what the next steps are after whatever it is.
So basically, in terms of grading, you can go up to 7th Q. No, we generally don't use 7th Q because that's basically saying you're probably not going to stab someone with a stick. So we normally start from 6th Q, and you work from 6th up to 1st Q. So 1st Q is the highest level you can get in the Q grades. And that's most of those ones that you will never wear bogu for. All you will really do is you'll show off a few kata. So the lower the grade, the less kata you do. You might do kata number 1 and kata number 2 and uchikaeshi, but just uchikaeshi going forwards and your footwork and basic cuts. And that will be the entirety of your grading. As you progress, you'll be expected to do more and more. Generally, when I do get gradings done for the Q grades, I will get you to do everything that you are capable of doing because you do not have to go up in sequence. If, for example, you start out, you don't manage to get a grading for 6 months or a year for whatever reason, we wouldn't start you on 6th Q if your form is better than that. Whoever is grading might go, yeah, no, they're up to about a 3rd Q, and they can jump you straight up. Usually you only get jumped a couple of grades, unless you are absolutely spectacular and you've been training for a while without a grade. So there can be a bit of a jump up on that. Then you have your Dan gradings. Now, unfortunately, in Australia, we don't actually have a number of high enough sensei to do Dan gradings because all of this is set by the International Naginata Federation, who, presumed that everyone could travel and presumed that we didn't have a pandemic and presumed that there was no such thing as being able to record gradings on video. So in order to get your Dan grade, you are most likely going to have to go to an international seminar of some sort. It might be, a lot of the time they are up in, sorry, I'm just going to mute because of the wind. No offense. So in normal times, they will generally have one international federation seminar a year. You normally know ahead of time where it's going to be. So usually around the World Championships, they have a meeting and decide who the next 4 host countries are going to be for the international seminar. And to be honest, most people don't like hosting the seminar because it costs a lot of money and it takes a lot of time. but it's considered an honor to do it, but it is quite a lot of work. A lot of them are held in Europe, sometimes in America. New Zealand's hosted a few times, which has been great for us because they've actually got quite a big cohort. And more importantly, they've got Alex Bennett Sensei, who is one of the foremost English-speaking practitioners of the form and of Kendo and Jukendo and everything else. So he's quite a big supporter of having seminars down here. There are also instances where countries may have a seminar that is not the international seminar, and you can be invited to go there or you can request to go there, and they will try and have enough senseis there that they can do some level of downgrade. And I'm going to be honest with you, it took me 6 years to get to my first international seminar, and I went from 5th Q to 1st Q because my form was good and I'd been practicing for a long time. I just hadn't been able to get a grading. And then it took me another couple of years before I could get to another seminar and get my my shoda, my first dan. To be honest, if I'd had Bogu at the international seminar where I got my first Q, they'd actually been planning to grade me for shodan because my form was good. They hadn't realized that I was actually still so down the Q grade. But if I had my Bogu, they were willing to bend that a little bit apparently to potentially get me my shodan. So there's a little bit of leverage with a lot of these, but I think the key thing to remember is that the gradings aren't everything. It's not like black belts, what have you. Naginata only has 5 dan grades. Kendo has 7, I think it is. Jukendo has 9. Actually, Kendo might have 9 as well. So first and second dan, you're starting to add a little bit of Bogu. You're starting to show you can work in it. Third dan, third dan I think is when you can go for start looking to go for your sensei qualification or certification. And it's also when you can start doing the Zen Nihon Kata, though we start you earlier than that because we know gradings take a while. And also looking at, what else? Judging. So that's when you generally start going to kind of the judging seminars as well. So you can prove that you can be a judge in a Shiai competition or an Engi competition. So yeah, gradings, unfortunately, in Australia are a bit more far and few between when it comes to dan gradings. With Q gradings, what I will generally try and do is when we've got a few people who have been practicing regularly and solidly for several months, I will actually talk to Sydney, who've got higher graded sensei, and I'll normally organize a video recording seminar. So I'll actually record you doing your kata, doing your engi, doing whatever you need to do from a few different positions around the dojo. I will send it up to them and they will remotely grade. So it's one of the ways we've come around trying to deal with that issue, because otherwise we literally couldn't get your Q grading unless you went up to Sydney or we paid for them to come down here. So yeah, it's a bit awkward, but I don't believe that you're
travel.
Sorry?
An excuse to travel. I'm not complaining. I've got 5 more days of quarantine. I'm happy if I can get out of here.
Fair enough. So yeah, so while generally they'd say, you don't do this thing until you're this grade or this dan, I can't hold with that in Australia because it isn't practical. It means holding people back when they shouldn't necessarily be held back just because of a label. So I'm not going to stop you learning more advanced techniques if I think you're capable and safe to do it, just because you don't have a grade.
That's brilliant. That spear throw that I saw that girl do and the jump, it was in a video I saw, and it was a demonstration in Japan, and there was a girl who was up against a guy who had a sword, and they actually used the naginata as a spear and nicked the sword off the guy and chopped his head off. It was awesome.
So part of that so naginata and yari or spear do have some commonality. So again, I said I do Toda Habukurio, and a lot of the techniques that you see in one, you see in the other, but the yari is a lot longer. But the nice thing with naginata is you can use that whole idea of we have a longer weapon than the kendo blade, so we should use that. And this is where things like kurikomi and kuridashi come in. So if I have my Naginata here and I'm up against a Kendo player, they can see how much length I've got against them because they're up against my mono itch. And so they're going, oh, they're far away, and they're muddled away over it. If I start creeping up and I end up more at a Kendo depth with them, their mind can go, oh, and they go into more of a Kendo mode. They're going, oh, they don't have any reach, but I do. So you can use the length of your weapon to lull them into a sense of security, or help them to forget how much extra length you have on them.
I have a feeling I may have seen the video that you're talking about. So when you said they used it as a spear, did they just pick up, you have their Naginata in their hands and just throw it at the person?
She literally did a little bit of a jump and threw it at the person. They were quite close.
Yeah, yeah.
Did it as a spear, and then she was in a gold kimono.
Yeah. They're well known. They're a group that practice in kimono. Yeah. And so, yeah, it's a very strange technique of throwing the Naginata, hitting them, and then while they're distracted or flinching, they steal the opponent's weapon and stab them with it. Yeah.
Okay.
Awesome.
Awesome, no doubt, but I am going to say I'm never going to teach you that technique. It's a bad idea to get rid of your own weapon.
Yeah, sorry.
So yeah, there are a lot of groups who use the weapons from the Japanese styles, but don't follow any of the structured forms, in a sense. So, and I mean, to a degree, that I could say it's a bad thing. I don't necessarily think it's not a sport. It's not Atarashi. It's not Kendo. What they're doing is a bit more like you would if you were in a real life battle situation. You're going, what am I going to do to take this person out? It's practicality rather than form. So I might use it to thrust like a spear, like a yare, but I am never going to get rid of my Naginata unless I'm absolutely forced to. So if it breaks off, sure, I might use it more like a jo, or like a really tiny yare, or tanshinai. Traditionally, you would also have a tanto in your belt, in your hakama. So you would drop the Naginata, what remained of it, and move to tanto. So sometimes when you saw people crossed up tight against each other, one might drop their weapon, pull out their tanto, and do a close-up work.
Yeah,
so, yeah. Those kind of performances are more on practical usage, but they're not what I'd call Atarashi Naginata or Kendo. They're not following the strictures of that style, as it were.
Yeah.
Absolutely cool, no doubt. It's like watching LARPers try and use a Naginata, which is hilarious and fun. But it's not a technique that you'll get to do, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
I didn't expect it. It was just something cool that I saw, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh no, absolutely. I agree with the coolness. I think you'd probably really enjoy seeing some of the Koryu styles. So as I said, I do Toda Habukurio, and it's really nice because it is Naginata against all kinds of weapons, not just Naginata sword, Naginata dagger, Naginata sickle and chain, Naginata spear. So you learn both sides of the equation.
Oh God, that'd be really tough for you at the moment, Emily, because it'd all be shut down and everything. Yeah.
Yeah, I have not touched a Kusarigama in over 2 years, and it makes me sad because I love the sickle and chain. It's fun.
Yeah.
So those Koryu styles, they're not one that you can go to international seminars as such, because they are a much more closed form. Generally, the senseis there, you pretty much apply, and they will decide whether or not to let you join. It's not the kind of thing where you can just pay and go, yeah, I'm going to do this. They will decide if you are spiritually, mentally a good fit. And they can kick you out at any point, which, technically can happen in any other form as well. If you decide you're going to try and stab people randomly, they can kick you out. But there's much more formality to it. There's much more, I'm not going to say respect. It's a different mentality. Whereas I'm quite casual in the way I teach, partly because that's an Australian thing. And I think it works better for a lot of people here to have a slightly more casual relationship. And also because we're a small group, I think it does better for us to have that rapport than we wouldn't get with a large group. but with Koryu, it's a very closed cohort. So it's a very different feeling, and I do enjoy it. I do love it, but you do play by the rules.
Yeah,
but it is very impressive. It's great fun to learn all these different techniques and different weapons, which is not something you get normally. If you do kendo, you learn shinai and bokuto,
and that's it. Yeah,
which might take you to iaido, but you're staying with the sword. You go to different forms of koyuso, tatsumoryu, which is a kendo base or a sword base, but again, they learn to fight against different weapons too. So yeah, that's kind of where you do get to see that inter-weapon operating outside of Ishujiai. Sorry, that was very long-winded of me.
no, it was good. It was good.
Yeah, so as I said, there's a lot of options out there. Most people have said when they think about Japanese Budo, they think Aikido, they think karate, they think kendo. Those are very, very common, well-known practices. Naginata is a niche style, and we do have a very small cohort in Australia. And it does make it a bit harder because we are further away from the rest of the world geographically and financially. So it will take longer to get your gradings, but there's nothing stopping you enjoying the form in the meantime. I said New Zealand's fantastic. They try and run a seminar every year. So, and Caitlin's been to a couple of those. They're a lovely group. So you can leverage off them quite easily. We do have the group in Sydney who are also really, really good, very supportive. So the Strenger Senseis, they're great. But again, they have a very small setup. It's a small group, and they actually practice in a dojo in their home. You know, one of those dream things where you can actually afford and have the space to have your own dojo. So yeah, but again, if you're interested in moving to something that has more inter-weapon operability, it doesn't hurt to look at Koryu, but generally it's quite hard to learn more than one style at a time. It can screw you up mentally and physically simply because you're having to switch how you move in between.
Quick question. I'm guessing there will be a headquarters or something somewhere. Is it in Japan somewhere?
So the International Naginata Federation is based in Japan. So a lot of these Budo, well, pretty much all the Budo, have the Japan Federation, and a lot of them have an international arm to cover all those weird foreigners who have decided to do these styles. And quite frankly, if you look up on YouTube, for example, the difference between an all Japan Naginata competition and a world championship is quite different, or an international Naginata Federation championship is quite different, because the Japanese are at a very different level. You have to remember that for most of them, they have started this potentially in primary school, and they've done this through high school. They've done it through university, and some of these training at a specific university to teach these. So their level is crazy compared to ours. It's about like, we're here. This is the international community, and here's Japan. So you will see quite a difference in technique and style. Doesn't mean that it's not a good thing. It means if you ever go to Japan and work under the Japan Federation, it's a lot more intensive, which is fantastic. But they will expect much, much more of you to get anywhere. But yeah, based in Japan, so all the communiques come from Japan. We do have representatives for each region to represent us at the meetings at the World Championships. So yeah, we do have some voice, but the Japan Federation sets kind of the rules for how Naginata works around the world.
No, I think
I have to say the only federation I know that it's not like that is the Jukendo Federation, which Kaylin and I are also a part of. Because a lot of the other ones, they have the All Japan Federation, and then they have a separate national. Whereas for Jukendo, they've actually kind of so sorry, there's a little bit of feedback there for a second, might have been a bit late. With Jukendo, what they did is they actually made the international group kind of a prefecture underneath the All Japan Judo Federation. So we're part of the All Japan Judo Federation, not a separate part. So that's about the only one I know of that actually does like that, and that was basically to make their life a bit simpler, and also ours, which is nice. Any other questions or queries? Terminology?
All good, thanks, Em.
Okay.
Awesome session, thank you.
So it was a little bit different. I said we didn't get to do as much sort of physical activity, but we did have some at the start and a little bit of waza. But I figured this is a good time to maybe just talk about some of the other features. So if you would like this to be a more regular thing, whether it's 10 or 15 minutes at the end of a session, that we actually have a discussion, let me know your feedback. We'll go from there. Otherwise, I will just start organising for next week's session. And we're halfway through October. Technically, we should be able to return to face-to-face training sometime in November. But under the current Victorian guidelines, you will have to be able to show proof of vaccination, is the only issue. So it is, if there is anyone who cannot attend because they don't have their full vaccination certification at that time, I'm quite happy to keep running some short little sessions online for Naginata for the moment, just as a kind of a dual thing. So until you can kind of catch up or into the restrictions.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, in that case, unless anyone's got any questions, I will let you all go for the rest of the afternoon. Enjoy your weekend. Enjoy your Saturday. I'll have the video up in a little while. But yeah, feel free to send through suggestions of what you might like to see in the next couple of sessions. And if you've got any questions that you want me to try and answer a bit more in depth as well. So I'll pause the recording now.